So we're just about to take off. But I'm pleased with the progress today. It's always nice when you stain things. I mean, it's cool to see that this is the new stuff, but obviously you know that. And when you stain stuff in, it just turns things into the sum of their parts more. So then they look, before then. But this is coming in level. These are nice and smooth for the most part. And again, you can set something on them. You can put plants and stuff on them. You could put a flower box on there. You could put some lattice in and frame it up and just, start a vine on it and have a little bit more privacy here, but it would still be pretty classy. And now with that extra railing, Chris said, he's like, I like it up here now. It's more of a obvious hangout spot. This is the lane of, for traffic. And I said, yeah, I'd already decided I think I like it too. But I was thinking from down here, it does make it, before on your approach, I don't know what the deal is with these, but before on your approach, it was like, ooh, kind of deking you out. Like, weird stare. Maybe your body, you want to do the soonest sort of climb. You head up, and there's a post here, so you bear right, but there's, you're cognizant of that. So now I think it's obviously, like anything, we don't need just exactly the surfaces and features that we physically engage in. We go beyond that. The ceiling's higher than the top of our head, right? The things like that. So I don't know that it really stands out as a problem area. But again, if somebody wanted to go to the next stringer or the next stringer and trim everything back and just fill in with some boards really quickly, they could remedy this, no problem. So better to have and not need than to need and not have. And so I think we're out of here for today. All right, back next. Okay, I made the notch perfect and double checked my work all around, and all of the geometry was working. But with the post slid into position, it was wildly, which is to say an inch or two in both directions, out of plumb. And I continued to struggle to figure out why. Less importantly, like this, is a matter of just pushing it. And I'm going to build in the railing system. And if I make it geometrically perfect, it will force this with the little bit that it was out, which is to the left, which is closing. It will force this over and make it plumb in it. If it had been out, I could hope to pull it back with attaching to my railing system. So that was, and again, the amount that it was out was not that big of a deal. Now the other issue though was in this way, and it was out like this, which made me feel that my notch had a problem with plumb, which I double checked it and it was not. And then I thought that this notch was not quite deep enough, so once we were where we were at the bottom, needed to be at the bottom, if we needed to move that way, it meant that we needed to deepen this notch going right. But then upon closer inspection, I could see, in fact it shows it a little bit still here, my pen and the line weight of it and everything like that is still apparent here, but I was tight back here and out of here by 3/16 of an inch, which is what I needed to come over to be plumb. So it was a product of the fact that the post wasn't square, and so when I took my notch out of square to sort of fit the post was able to tip all the way that way to basically theoretically close this gap. Now it's a bit open here still, which means I could slide the flush saw in and take a little more there, but I'm content with the way that looks. And further, once I had the ability to go over there, how do I stay over there? Because there was some spin that was happening in the joist, and we're well attached to that joist, but the joist is controlled for vertical here and over there at that post, which means we can't get much farther away from the torsional constraints that it should have. And so we were getting some wang dangling in this way, which is sort of the antithesis of what you need in a sturdy feeling guard rail. So I ended up jumping a block across down here, so I just ripped the angle of the over, it's all the same angle. It'll be the angle for all of this stuff. Angle for those, everything's 35 degrees. So I put a 35-degree angle on that so it would go up to the back of the stringer. It's just a 2x4. And I went to 14 and 9/16, which is a 1/16 of an inch bigger than 14 and a half, which should be I checked it, but it should be your perfect theoretical interior face to interior face on a 16-inch on center layout in 1.5-inch lumber sticks. So I went to 14 and 9/16 just to overdrive it a little, smashed it in there, and now the bottom of this rim, or this first joist, can't tip in at all, let alone, or furthermore, it's a bit overdriven, if anything. And so in that, we are looking, good enough for the kind of tolerances that we're using. I can't get close enough. But, you know, we're looking quite good in both ways. Again, we're a little closed, if anything, here, and we'll just overdrive that when the time comes to put in the railing. So now the question is how to, without CAD, which is what I would normally do, but people jab me sometimes about like, ooh, you can do it on CAD. Well, our stick here is going to have that 35-degree angle on the face of it as a plumb cut, because that's the angle to go down the stairs from point to point to point to point. That's the angle there. That's this angle. And so I can make that end, and I could lay the 2x4 in here and land, because these, no, they're not a little bit longer than this. Shit. I was going to say, if they came out, if I had, in a lot of cases, the tread ends are a bit longer, so then I can be flush here and stop on the tips of those stairs, and then I can just scribe this, and that's and it'll be 35, but it'll give me a sense of how long and where to make that cut. So I'm going to do something like that here, and once I have the one, I'll just copy it exactly, and as I go up, yeah, it's going to become tight, but that's where we're looking for this to be pushed over. And the measured distance from here, elevation wise, from there and there to there, if we get to that place with the second piece made to match the first, and we buckle that all in there, or we at least get it to a point where we can measure what we need for a vertical, and the two verticals will be rhombuses, and they'll be the same length, and then I can lay it down flat on the deck and put all four corners together tightly and perfect, and then come back and install it to the locations where it should be here. In fact, I'll put the balustrade balusters into the balustrade when it's lying flat, and then it'll come in and be installed. And I'll do it the way that we did these, I guess. So the vertical 2x4s will stay on the post when we get the frame in here, tap it all around where we like everything, and then I'll install those, and I'll attach the corners in such a way that the top and the bottom can come off, have the baluster post put in between them, and then the whole thing will slide back in, be attached down from the top and in edgeways like we did here on the bottom with those finish head screws, which are, you know, they basically disappear. They pull in and the grain closes, and you end up with this tiny little speck, and that's, if you do a nice layout, they just disappear to the eye usually. It's a nice acceptable way to face fasten in the scheme of things here, and you know, in other types of woodworking you don't do that, but in this situation we do, and it's fine. So we'll do that way, and hopefully get this to a point where we can at least cut that post tonight. I may not finish the balustrade, and I may not get that cap in there. I didn't realize that fastener that I put in at an angle right there, because this cap was rolling up, so I brought it down where it should be and pinned into there, but I guess you can see that screw. I could do a different and better job there. That's really not very nice. This is the least finished side of this thing, but and so things like this are happening over here, where there's that tape top of a joist that you've got to have, and nothing finishes that. But more importantly, you've got this nice clear open area under this deck, which keeps it breezy and dry in a otherwise kind of cramped and humid backyard space like this, which is the best case scenario. So you got to take the good with the bad, take the rest, and then you go back to work. All right, using the tape this way, I just wanted to be sure of it before I said something. Will work out. It can lie there. We're essentially touching the tips of the steps all the way up here, touching that, and we're coming to there, which would be the short end of our rhombus cut. So we're looking at the bottom of this tape as the bottom surface of the 2x4 that we're going to make. And so this is the short, because it's the open side of the angle on the end. And then down here, this is the long. So we're doing, you know, short to long, and kind of come down. That's about the corner up there. So we're doing short to long. 38.5 would probably be a safe bet, because it's a bit longer than what is shown on here. We can always take a skim off. So we'll do a 38.5 long to short with a 35-degree angle both ends, and we'll bring it and tap it in here and see if it needs modification. All right, I'm content with this here, and you want to think of this sort of thing as if you took a square section and racked it. So I'm going to put the layout for these balusters on the same 2-inch like spacing on here. They're going to get the angle on them. They're going to go center to center on those. And yes, as you close this thing, in the same way that if you rack this shut, this vertical end and that vertical end are going to grow ever nearer to one another until they touch as that thing racks close. So by the same logic, every vertical in here, for every amount that you travel out of square and start closing it, the gap between them is going to close. So we want to see at a certain point it's acceptable, and beyond that it's kind of getting unacceptable, or in fact, it can close to where, you know, in a theoretical space, this would touch and that would stop you from closing it any further. So it's not quite 45, so I don't expect to close this gap quite half. So I still think if there's an inch in here, we'll have 5/8 of an inch or something in terms of a gap. It'd be nicer to have more like 3/4. Getting down to half of an inch is getting tight, and beyond that, it starts to become, you know, kind of congested. So we'll have a look at what it is. The other thing that I'll mention is, as you rack that theoretically, you know, I want to see this cap travel, or basically this 2x4 rail, its elevation, I wanted it to be the elevation of this point, as though it theoretically comes across and then pivots and then comes down. Same with this here, from here through and then tips down there, so that they appear to connect, you know, when you look through. And more importantly, the cap ends up at the same place. Now, a lot of times handrail, guard is higher, and then the handrail, if it's on guard, it's on the inside, obviously facing people, but it's down and in. And so, you know, when you see handrail continue after guard, sometimes it apparently there's a different kind of school of thought, and sometimes you can see this drop down. And in fact, these, I think I mentioned back when I built them, they are not up there, they're down here, so that it's a handy place to grab. The end of it seems logical here rather than up here for handrail. It's starting to get kind of, it dwarfs you as you stand down here, and I'm you know, as a short person even more so I brought that down. This over here is more guard, and it's code compliant. It's necessary to ostensibly keep someone from falling off the end here. It's less of a handrail, and you can use it like a handrail, but I'm inclined to make it at the same elevation as that top cap, and under the same, you know, use the same anatomy as the top cap, meaning I'll cut this at this angle and I'll cut it flush right there, and the cap will sit and overhang everything and go up and be an extension of that. Now, if I had a different, and I ran the design past them, it was more like these, and it was more, it didn't have a newel, it just stuck out in space a bit farther than those do, and I filled down beneath, they just weren't happy with any of that. And so if it was an extension of handrail, it would have probably started lower, than more, you know, looking more like this here, and whatever. So since we're basically extending the guard, that's how I chose that. But the point is, these are 32.5 inches long, these balusters and these 2x4s at the ends and everything. And so I started with a rhombus that was 32.5 from long to short, or long to short, but that ended up because of the angle. I checked with my square, I came across here and I was about a half an inch higher, so I took that half out. So these are 32 even from long to short, and that maintains the visual there. And it's just one of those geometry things that you might see in CAD, but I wanted to pay attention here before I just blindly button everything up. And I have got a discrepancy where the bottom lines up and the top is a bit high, and the cap would make it even worse. So the cap needs to look like it's turned and then levels out with the rest over there. So some esoteric stuff, some detail stuff, but in renovation, details matter. In an investigation, details matter. And in a long-term deck construction situation, details matter. So Chris and I are back on this deck today, and we just need a couple of things technically to close the project out. We certainly have to have the inside finished, but we've got to have guard and handrail on the end of this stairwell or stairway. So monument or wedding cake type stairs like this, that gives a pass on those short railing systems, because I guess we wouldn't necessarily need anything, as the stair width is such that once you're on it, it apparently doesn't have anything to do with the width. So it's the ends that end up needing to have the railing or something. Regardless, we got to have something here. And I had initially planned on putting my newel post at the first floor level over here, but I realized that if I can tuck it in here, it's all the shorter of a railing section, and our cap made of larch will be the longest thing that overhangs by a couple of inches, or basically the same amount it overhangs on the sides of the baluster, which looks like about 2.5, 3 inches or so. So I just need to get a post in long enough and build a rhombus frame from 2x4, the way that these were built as rectangle, and then determine the dimension, the length of my post, my baluster, and the angle, and I'll pop a few of them out. I'll probably end up putting a group of 3 on each of the 3 stair centers. I'll have to see how that looks, because the post encringes on that first group. because it encroaches on the stair. And then starting on this stair and this stair, we have more room there. So I'm not quite exactly sure on how I'm going to, copy the look of this, where I'm not sure that because what this is an even space where when removing one from the even spacing, it leaves us with a gap smaller than 4 inches, but significant nonetheless. So that was the way that I think it's every 2 inches. So every 2 inches on the center line out of a given span of balustrade, and then we just omit every third one or fourth one, and we get that look. So for what it is, I think it has like a bit of a classier look to it. So we got to figure out a way to get that into this section here. But to start with, all these stringers have just got the raw end sticking down, and so that worked out. I needed to take that much off of this stringer, so I ended up slicing. I unbuttoned these boards and came through there cleanly, which is going to be right at the back of that. I don't think there's any reason to cut this off completely. I think it's kind of cleaner to have a bit of a return on the step to the post. I think that looks more finished. So in the case of some of these, well, the argument could have been made, I guess. Here, the face of the post works out flush with the little step, and the post sits proud. So I could have done the same thing there, but I didn't, and it's too late now. And that was my concern as I laid these out, because if you don't like something you did here, that full 20-foot stick with stain that's aged in with the rest of the deck will need to be replaced. It needs to be clear to the extent that we can find something without knots, and it would stand out like a sore thumb to put fresh stain on it, and it would take me the rest of the day to procure, get it back here, and get back to where I am now. So that's the notch that we're going to use. This is the post. We're going to put an 1.5 inch depth notch in it so that it ends up flush and on the same plane as this post, so that our railing system can stay centered between the two of them. And so we'll get that notched, and then we'll stand it up, and then we'll likely build to it for a while before we see exactly where it needs to be cut and at what angle at the top, and at least plot that angle on it in place, if not cutting it in place. There's a chance it needs to come back down, although I can't imagine. I think I can route that bevel onto it from this side and from the other side with the router, so I don't have to bring it out again to put the router bevel on. So I'll likely install it and cut it down later and see how far we can get on this today. Meanwhile, Chris has got the ends of the purlins cut, and he's putting a router bevel on every end, and then we're going to get the panes in the glass taped and probably try to put some clear coat on the inside of the door, because I forget she didn't even need a color. She just wants it cleared. And keep it the natural wood tone that it is. So we might be able to if we can mask it, we can spray poly on it today. So good luck. Well, I just didn't even bring the miter stand over. The mini truck is a nice height. It's the same height actually as the miter stand, but I did miss the ability to use it as a jig or have a stop set up for the length of all of these. So the first one I made sure of and cut it here with the tip just touching some inanimate object here, and I carefully did the other 8 for a total of 9. In the same way, so we've got 9 32-inch long to short baluster posts, and I got a layout translated over there. So I'm going to go and button those together and see if I can't put this in physically today. And there's a chance that we could even brush out some stain on everything that hasn't been stained yet. That would look really nice. Well, I just realized the fact is that the threads need to cut into the end of the post, but they need to have a clearance hole through these components. So while I've got the whole locations marked, every one of those has to be drilled from there and through at this angle, and it needs to come out the bottom. The thing is, the hole could be drilled from this layout and play out by hand as close, the angle varying as much as it may be from me being as careful as I can. And then we turn around and just, rather than putting this screw through, what do I want to say here? How am I trying to say it? So even though you drill from the side where the layout is, and you do your best, you probably set this up at an angle, you put the tip of your drill here, and you'd eyeball that when you did it, and you tried to be there, but then there's no telling whether you're up and down in this way, and so you come out all over the place on the back here. However, then you could turn it around, and you could put the screw in from that way, and that the screw will come out at the right point all along, regardless of the direction that the drilling operation happened. But right now, and you have to be careful of what angle and what direction, because these locations vary. Notice that the distance based on the way that this played out, the distance from this last mark to the short end and this last mark to the long end, this is a bit smaller than that is longer. So you turn this around, then they'll be in there canted, and you make a mistake there. So flipping and turning and altering directions gets to be a real problem in something like this. And then you're trying to put this in the right place, and you know, if the screw happens to be coming from this way, that way, well, they won't be wildly all over the place, but it'll be trying to line up with that center, and it's going to come from a variety of angles like this, depending on how you do the drilling there, and it's going to land, it's going to pull this as a result into different directions. It's just going to be tough. The thing to do, unfortunately, even though it's right here to be put together in theory, is to go and set the drill press up at home with the table at this angle, and then do a drill press operation on each one of these using that mark, and know that in every other way the holes will be quite close to coming out exactly right. And then you can go ahead and put the screw in from the pencil mark side, which is the way that I laid these out, so that I was sure to always have these glued, or excuse me, ready to screw together in the right orientation, because that's the top and this is the bottom. So excuse me, actually the marks are on the wrong side because of the way that the layout changes. If I were to flip this around and try to get the marks on this side, because it's the bottom side, because that's the side the screws are going to come up to, then those will be in there out of plumb. So there's a lot of different factors here basically that you need to keep track of, or you have yourself tricked into making things more simple to do, and in the end you'll ruin the final product, and you can remake all of this stuff or whatever. You can remake at least some of it, or at least decombobulate and recombobulate, which is a waste of time. The other thing I can do is I can set up the drill press with the table when it's up at an angle. I can go to fully plumb, and I can make a stop on it, so at least where it's drilling is right on the center of this aspect ratio square, and regardless of this angle, I could drill a nice hole right in the center, you know, crosshair center of these sticks, going straight down the central axis of it, and just keep putting one in there, and just keep putting one in there, putting one in there, and just drill, do all the other ends of them. So it's an hour spent at the drill press between setting it up for the two different operations and getting through the operations faithfully and getting stuff loaded back up to come back over here. But then you can come over here and put together the kit. Actually, you could put that together at home and bring it over here and slide it into place, which in the end is a better use of everybody's time and money. So that means that those components will come home with me, but at this point I can put that top piece back in here and plot out where this needs to be cut and carefully cut it. And then I could put stain on all of this stuff, and I'll just save putting it on that until it comes back and it's in position and doesn't need to be touched anymore. So I can keep working. You want to think about stuff like that. Well, I got a quick second on my way by. I got this built at the shop the other day, and I'll just pop it in place in the backyard for some visual progress here. Well, I'm hoping that's acceptable. We had hoped to avoid this, but I actually don't mind it at all. Sometimes these little details, that's what's weird about debadging vehicles and stuff in my mind. Literal details, small aspect ratios, fine tolerances or whatever, gappage, getting down into this gap and here and stuff. It's a necessary part to, and the things in here, that's why these little things, that's why trim and sidings and stuff like that start to establish a higher frequency of shadow lines and highlights. It's just a component to feeling that you've got all of the component parts, along with the puke, apparently. So anyway, a little more detail, and then a modification on that detail where it tips down at this angle starts to create finishing touch effects. Obviously need a cap on top, and I don't know what I was thinking over here, I'll be honest with you. This post location made sense in every way with framing, since my last rim is way over there, and I didn't want to put it on the end of, I didn't want this coming out and overhanging everything, although that probably would have been my problem being this gap. They're not going to like that gap in what's technically the railing system, so I'm going to try and get away with that. But they're going to say a kid can squeeze out and fall from there, and so I think I'm in for new post and a new piece on the top, new top board there, 2 new fascia boards, and a few more railings or a few more balusters cut to that length, and upper and lower components to the railing and the top cap all need to be replaced, unfortunately, likely to close out our building permit. And we've got to finish inside around the door and obviously this bit here. But I had a minute today to get this much done, and we'll get back here as soon as we can. Welcome back, viewers, to this cool project. Our multi-level pergola overlooking a multi-level deck with a tree that comes through the middle of it. I'm just getting the posts cut down finally to flush. They were all installed overly long and left this way, and I didn't mean for it to be this long, which is how this type of stuff always goes, but they're just part of finishing the punch list here, and we left off of finishing the punch list because I was making things more spectacular than I was going to need to be paid. And so she was open to that. This has been usable for years. She's really enjoyed it. She's left the yard to get to be more of a meadow, and she's just been psyched to have as much as she's had, and I've been happy to add a lot more to it than she would have ultimately had to have paid for. So I pulled the plug on having to pay, and like all of the joists got this big curve cut to the bottom, and some other factors around here, and it's just taken me a while to get back to trim inside the door where the curved top needs a curved piece of trim, so we'll look at that in a minute. But for now, I'm going to start by cutting these down. I just did that one, and we'll get these cut down first, and that way we won't be waiting all the time. I come down here and I work a little bit every 6 months, and I get to some more stuff. We got little handrails put on down there, but I never quite get up here and do this. I always wanted my helper, my helper to get up here and do it, whoever that may be. And sometimes they don't feel comfortable. They feel like they're going to wreck everything. Well, it's important to cut a slight angle on these and do a smooth, straight job of it. And I even cut into the joist a bit more than I wanted there, but you can't see any of this from down below. And so really it's just a matter of getting it done. And so I'll just get up here and do it. If you want something done right, you do it yourself. So I got 6 to do. Those 2 by the house ended up shorter already. I think they were 16s instead of 20s that I put in, so they're a little bit trimmed down already. Anyway, let's get this thing cut. Well, we're back at this old Tony. This old project's been several years in the making, but we're taking our time so that we get things as nice as possible on a tight budget. So we've still got the wall to paint and the trim to put up, and an extension jamb that's made but needs to be stained to match. And we're really going to have some time in getting both the extension jamb and the final trim to curve, but I'll show you how that's going to happen when we get there. Chris is here. He got the windows masked last time, and we were going to spray after we put color, but we ended up using Rubio Monocoat, which is a catalyzed color and finish together. It ends up a satin, which is kind of more fashionable now more than ever. And in 24 hours, it'll have been fully cured. And, frankly, we probably didn't even need to mask, because I think when you wipe that excess off, you can wipe it off the glass and stuff. But there was most of what you needed for masking on this anyway. So he had just added that tape. Outside, we're kind of to a point where we've got the other double beam to put up over here, which we got stalled out on because at the time we didn't have the right length of through lock. So we need to have an outer and an inner, where we've just got the inner one here. And then I forgot about this. We still got my F clamps up there. Still got our big old clamps that look good. I would have thought they'd be drooling rust by now, but we've got to, this post really wanted to twist. So we've just got to apply some forces to attachment. Looks like for that beam right there needs it. And then this, unfortunately, I'm going to draw everybody's attention to this bad cut. It's got to be the, not titular, but like most prominent arc that was supposed to complement the arc of these doors. It was where all the ideas for arcs everywhere came from. But I had all these cut at a millwork shop that was set up with a real thick blade that could do an arc and be nice and smooth. And overall, they're still a little wiggly, but very tolerable. This was our prototype one. And for whatever reason, it didn't get fixed before it went up. So now I got a project of like making it look nicer, which is also something I want to do. And kind of, that's it. We got this cover in that we've probably seen over the AC. And that's still looking good, although we are getting kind of tight. We've talked about this. I can't believe it. In the 2 or 3 years that there were, I got to go back and look, but there were a couple inches here, but it's encringing. and infringing. And these were designed to be cut back as needed. Although I don't think you're supposed to just leave this out in space cantilever because it might be breakable. Although we would start there. We would cut into it just for a couple inches of relief in both of those places. But soon enough, it looks like it's going to have to come all the way back to this ring. So this will be something she wants to sell in a couple of years, or not even that long. So it'll be something for the next person to deal with after this ring. But at that point, the tree may be something that needs to be taken out. And we're going to clean up her yard for a little bit to get some final photography. But we got our little short railings up, and I got to put a top cap on this. It's going to be made from larch, but they needed this at the town as well. What was the deal here? Because of the height off the end at the top stair, I think, made it this had to exist down to here. We were hoping to avoid that. I don't know why they won't make me do it here, because that didn't come up on this end of it. But they did make me close this off, so maybe that's a part of it. And then I went ahead and did all this because physiologically, or in terms of the anatomy, it was really easy to cut this post in and take this over to here. But now I realize I probably should have slapped it on the actual outside corner, because this is going to be greater than 4 inches. And as a balustrade, you can't pass a 4-inch sphere, a theoretical 4-inch sphere, as a child's head might pass through there. And that's an entrapment thing. But you get this far, it's obviously not close to being entrapment, but it's going to be an attractive nuisance for a kid to fall off of them there. They're probably going to make me have to put something to be within 4 inches of the siding. So I'll likely not do anything more with this post. We would likely build a small section of this, very small, like one rectangular prism or something. And because, geez, it isn't even enough to build a frame and have a post. I guess maybe you could do like this. So you'd have a 1/2 inch to either side of one of those, and you'd be like 6 inches overall, which would actually overhang the ends of the deck right here and be weird, but maybe not. We'll see. But we may have to cantilever a little thing out, and then you'd have to remake the top cap so it's properly a bit longer than that, all because I was this close to it instead of this close to it on the day. Again, thinking about what would make it quick and easy to add it from all other angles other than the final thing meeting the safety requirements. So, and we got to chop those posts down. So we got another day on site for the outside stuff with 2 guys, and another day on site with the inside stuff if I'm super strategic. But it's just 1 guy probably for that, because it's too tight quarters to work 2 people together at one time. We got the pile of wood ready to go out, so we'll load that in the truck, and then we will disappear. Oh, we got to come back and pour a little cat litter out, because the pressure sprayer sat there and piddled out on the floor when we weren't looking, and now we've got this. But it smells nice, and she doesn't seem to mind. It's a bit laissez-faire around here if you haven't noticed, but be that as it may, we'll put some cat litter on there. It's the least that we can do, and then we're out of here for now. I'll catch you next. All right, outside bending this top piece was easy because it's PVC, and I did it in, I want to say, you can kind of see, I want to say 1, 2, 3 pieces, and they would do that bend edgeways because PVC is pretty super flexible. So they're disguised in the wood grain, and then you've got this bead that's on the outside of that. I guess I didn't do, it is like that on the original windows. There's a trim, and then there's this extra. On this edition window, it's not like that. Up there, those are original trim. This is was addressed, or it was removed. That additional part was removed on that one. This house is like long overdue for new windows and doors. It's nice that they got this nice new door. But inside, the windows are trimmed this way, and the door opening is trimmed this way. So how did I work this out? Because this wall is so twisted. If we're at the end of this video series on this project overall, it's been years now. It's been 5 years getting back. But the door unit is perfectly plumb, because there's most doors, it's super important to have that, but especially a big opening with a big swinging slab. So I don't want to scrub the floor in here. I don't want it to try and fall open or fall closed. And you want everything to be flush, best you can get it inside and the gaps to be equal. It has to be perfectly plumb. So because the wall isn't perfectly plumb, you end up needing to add extension jam that is a taper. So it's thicker down there than it is up here, and that's just a factor of measuring to the face of the wall here, measure to the face of the wall here from the jam that was on board the door, and then the length, and translate that to a piece of material and rip that material. So this is a little heavy. It's a little heavy. It's misleading to look at, but it's a little proud of the surface of the wall because, again, the house is old and it undulates too. It isn't perfectly flat. So we're a little heavy, if anything. And then once I add that piece, I shot that on with some finish nails. We can add the trim, which is this board, to the two sides, and we can get something to lay in there in 3 or 4 pieces up at the top. And then it'll be off the wall a little bit, but that's okay because we can set this component down onto the wall on the sides and at the top, and that's the way trim is designed to be used. That's why you have that. And so here it could be caulked and stuff. So there's a really relatively low bar of kind of finish quality overall. The bones need to be there, and they will be, but those little details at the end, like caulking everything and making every little hole disappear and everything like that, it's not to that level in here to start with. So we just ideally going to get the pieces up on there that need to be there. And the house is being sold, so we're just helping her out, making sure that we close out the building permit, because they won't close this out until everything's complete and utterly done. They won't go to finished quality. They won't hold us on finished quality standards. It just needs to have all the pieces applied, and you can't have what looks like, obviously, a rough opening. So the rips are up. Now I'm going to translate the curve line onto there and cut that in place with my oscillating tool. And then I've got some little rips, thin, see what and how many will do the bend. And then I'm going to try to lay them over up onto there. And I might try to nail them if they're thick enough into the jam and carry the curve that's up here. You can also put blocks on here, like a shelf that stick out, and clamp to those while you get everything just so, but I don't want to put holes in this if I can help it. I'm going to try and do this whole thing without, even though they'd be little nail holes and you could fill them, I'm going to try to keep from having to do that. So let's see what I can do. We'll have to look and see how much growing this has done since we built the deck 5 years ago, but I'm sure it wasn't touching this cast iron anywhere. Here it is and there. And these are designed with these concentric rings to be trimmed open as the tree grows larger. And you can actually even leave these cantilevering out into space to some extent. So I don't want to do too much of that. In fact, I don't want to take anything here because this is where the tree kind of naturally pulls away. And I'm comfortable with, I'm going to say I'm comfortable practically all the way around to like here. So then we'll take the ring away and we'll leave these fingers or whatever, the tabs that we're talking about there being here. We'll take this ring away here to there, and then for now I might just cut it there, and then we'll come back here as well. So we'll see what it feels like supporting a full-grown man's weight. If more needs to be cut back, more needs to be cut back. Worst case scenario, it can be cut back to the inner edge of this concentric circle, but then the dog toy or whatever else, even a foot can go down in there. And that's not great. So let's cut away less and see what we need to keep before we wish we hadn't cut as much as we did. You know what I'm saying? Well, I also had a couple rips that, because I had sort of designed this trim package and I'd given it to Jeremy to make for me. So I'm pleased that both my work and his turned out well. I've got 2 pieces that taper from this dimension here to this dimension here, which is greater. So they're the same taper overall. They were a little too long, so I lopped 6 inches off or whatever they're on the floor. So they'll sit inside from drywall to drywall right now. And I know that I've got more than I need here, but hopefully not only just a little bit more than I need. And so now what I think I want to do is, because if they glue up and dry to one another, doing the right curve, that's a step in the right direction. If I take them down from there, they would probably open up just a little bit. However, like I say, it's a step in the right direction. So I need a little wood glue, and then I think rather than putting blocks up onto the jamb with holes you can see, I will actually screw into the jamb. It's nice and thick, 5/4, but I can like push this down and screw right there, and then I can go to the next position I have to be at and screw into the jamb there, and continue to just put a big heavy construction screw in there, and then I can spring clamp to that as well, and I can just bite to the screw, bite to the screw, bite to the screw, and I'll just chase it over to whatever point I find out. If I have too much, I can cut it again in position and just keep it glued together and clamp to the screws that are holding it. And then I can add some spring clamps along the way too, just to close the gap and everything. And then I can just leave it there to dry. In fact, even the door will work and should swing past it because it should be up, if anything, a little higher than planer than the jamb, right out of the way of the door. And that would be our extension jamb. So then I can come back and take the screws away. If it wants to sit back up here a little bit, I can screw with a finished screw right through it down into this trim. And then I've just got to go and get some of this material and this material. It's probably just flat pack. I assume it's 3/8 by 1.5 and 1/2 by 3, and then a little inner like OG shape. Probably the same stuff as here. It's basically stop, window stop, I think. So I may not even need to go to the trim supplier. I could probably just go to like the box store and grab that stuff. Because again, close enough, it's gonna work out. We're just gonna do what's over this and around this opening here. It will be white. The jamb is natural finish, just like the door is, and so I guess in a perfect world, the extension jamb would have been a natural color as well. Because, if anything, because the taper varies, you can kind of tell here that things are cockeyed. But there's so many hinges, and there's just so much going on. It's not all that noticeable, and so I think because the room's white and the trim is white, and then the extension jamb is white, and then the line between the extension jamb and the door will be the same, distance, will be parallel, between this white and this natural right here. That line is perfectly aligned up through the center line of the hinges visually, and so one way or another, we've hidden the twist in this, and it's, it'll be white, and that'll be good. And the next people can worry about continuing to carry the torch. It's just endless. So, and I got what I need in baseboard. It just needs to be cut back in place. I guess let's get that supported and glued together and screwed and clamped, and go buy some trim. And, we got one more thing we could do before we leave, so let's go look at that. All right, we're back here today just to see what we got away with yesterday and make it so that she can use her door. And so you can see that I essentially got the two pieces up, and so I did this twice. Dry, I put both pieces up and simply started by adding a screw here that sort of pinned it down, and then I just kind of went along and controlled. Now before I clamped this, I controlled the reveal to be, or took the clamp off. I tried making sure that there was basically a reveal on the jamb, so that if anything, this sits a bit higher than that plane. I'll throw these here. This is my painting stuff anyway, but and then I got it back up there with glue between the two layers and clamped it to the screws. And then when the screws come out, the hole that they leave, won't be seen. Unlike the other, sort of place that we could have sort of used to control this curve while that glue set up. I think this was a better option, and now I can open the door without the clamps in the way. And the thing is, this piece still isn't even connected to anything else. This is all just to get it, shaped in the general kind of shape. Then I'll pull the screws out another day. And now that I've got a substantial width to the piece, I can literally put this exactly where I want it, and I can shoot nails to hold it there. And that'll put it just exactly where it should go, and thereby I kind of built the custom piece that we need in place there. And taking the measurements and pre-building, to whatever extent that I did with the rest of it, with the taper and stuff that I ordered from Jer, it worked out kind of nice, and I'll be able to add a trim package and close it all down. I just can't believe I couldn't get here before now, and I can't stay today because I've got Sir Henry this afternoon starting at 4, and I got a boogie home right now for 3, get a ride to the shop to get my car and bring that home in time to take over with him so that I've got more cost-effective wheels. And this is working for yourself and being a new dad and everything else. So this is why things just creak along here. So I can get back here tomorrow. I think I'll get the trim we need from the trim supplier in the end. I did stop and look at what like Lowe's had. And rather than like this 3/8, they've got half, or even it's like too big. It isn't nearly as close to this as I'd like it to be. And it was pre-painted. However, I don't think it's worth all the benefits of pre-painted for the cost of it. And I don't know if an 8-foot stick, that's a good question. I've got to check and see if these were made from 8-foot sticks, you know, because I cut 6 inches off. Or they may have been, they must have been. But I'll just verify that because I got to know just exactly how much trim I need so that I'm sure that I get a quantity that's great enough, obviously, right? So we'll check that today. The door works again, and we'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully I'll cover where we get then. Well, it's been a week or two. I'm back here finally again, and I was able to glue these pieces up. I had far more screws in at that time. I don't know if I covered that when they were in there, but I got down to taking out every one, but the one on either end, one in the middle, so it doesn't just spring way away from here. But now I can move along, and I'll probably staple, and I can kind of control the reveal here. I'll try to keep the reveal of the actual jamb a little bit, maybe just a little bit, and I can kind of have things end for end a little. You know, it can close to me. I can push it out in a way, but I won't really move off of my curve too much, I don't think. And once I'm happy with that on there, I can open both doors and take out the last of the screws, and I can put a piece of plywood up, and I can scribe. It'll be the jamb that I'm scribing because it'll be the one that sticks down more. So I'm not getting away from accuracy or whatever in scribing this thing because I'll be scribing the jamb basically. No, I won't. I will scribe this because it's going to hold me out here. The plywood's going on this plane. So I'll be scribing this curve, but that's fine. I'll be doing my best to set it down tightly to the curve that's in the door to start with. And where am I going? Then I can take that home to the bench, and I can laminate the curved slices of trim board against that pencil line that I scribe on the bench laying flat. I may even be able to cut that line, and this is tall enough to work as like a clamping thing, and I can clamp to this, or I can add a little bit of thickness to this and clamp to it. So I was going to maybe build it in place. I think that's what I did outside, actually, but we're not going to now. And got the neighborhood kid cleaning out the backyard, getting ready for, I think, a sale here. So fortunately, /unfortunately, but I think whoever buys this is going to really enjoy this being right outside the back through this door, hopefully. That was my hope. And she was talking selling, you know, when the kids were done with school like this, when I started this project. So I don't think anything's like a miserably awful, unfortunate reality. She's, I think, really enjoyed the deck, and the next owners can just build on that. This is a nice door. I get to see it 5 years later. It was a tough installation. It's not quite done being trimmed out and finished. I certainly could have done it way faster than this if there weren't other factors at play, but I'm pleased that it still works really nicely. It's had a little bit of user error, unfortunately. Like, you need to latch this slab on the left so that it can function as a jamb. If you leave it to float, it could be a pain. So you bring the handle up when you're out here in that location, I believe, there, so that you're in the right location. And then that gasket's been chewed up maybe by Rue. Poor little Rue. She has passed, I'm afraid. Passed last year, or maybe earlier this year, but she was a sweet little lady, that's for sure. She brightened our days here on the job site for this one. So anyway, yeah, this still works really nicely, and this backyard is really going to be something special. with some landscaping. We'll get this power washed and stuff and put a new coat of stain on it, hopefully. It's looking a little green. Okay, back to work. So this strip of plywood that I had isn't wide enough to get a full scribe on there. So I got the rest of it on another place. So I'll cut this piece out and I'll cut these curves off and I'll just add this piece here and I'll get everything to come together close enough to be averaged by the stick of wood that I first bend on there as the first course, and then I'll bend all the others against it with glue flat on the table, and it'll basically be a jig, and I'll glue up something that can be deformed just a little bit in or out from there, but mostly very close to what I need to go over that door. A little bit of sanding and cutting the ends, and we'll be in really good shape. This terminates, the scribe terminates here, and it terminates there, and that is relative to the corner, the turn from vertical to curve, very accurately, because it was sitting on the doors. The doors open to 90 degrees. This thickness of plywood slid down the wall until it stopped, and I was just shy of the actual point where that corner is by the same amount on both sides. So what does that mean? It means that this is symmetrical and relative to where the angle starts on the piece that I glue up. So it won't just be completely lost in here. I'll be able to use this template to make sure and hold the curve based on this flat side, at least this, what's left of this flat side after I take this out and the end of it over there, that flat straight area, I can use that to project a center line and put that center line right on that curve, and then I can measure over and cut an angle, and ultimately cut the ends of this curved piece very accurately. And then I'll build the vertical, or I'll put the vertical up and scribe that angle and cut that on the vertical, because it's much easier to handle a vertical and work with angles against the straight side of a vertical. So we'll get something just really close to what it should be using CAD. I'll figure out how to plot it, and then I'll use this jig to put it on the real part and cut it. I'll put it on the wall, I'll put the vertical up and scribe it. I'll take the vertical down and cut it right on the scribe line and put it back, and hopefully that way we'll get this thing trimmed up. But first things first, we've got to cut out this jig shape. Well, I've got the laminated curve up here. I had to pull this side just down a little bit. I'm trying to there were two pieces here of about 1/4 inch each, right? So I was trying to just show the lower one. I'm a little higher than that here. I'm a little lower here. The curve and that's the point of a reveal, is to sort of accommodate these things. And so I didn't want to be anywhere near flush. I wanted to be relatively consistently stepped over. So that's the tightest spot. It's largest here, but we're back to 1/4 on both sides, and it's in the center as well. So I've still got my center line from the glue up even that I put on the center line of the door. So I'm feeling good about it. And then I made the side pieces based on my measurement to the finished floor to 1/4 inch back from the face of the jamb. And that point is where I put that, on my component and cut it to the short there. It's 30-degree angle. I could go through that, but I had it outside a year or two ago when I trimmed this. The same angle as here. It's set your speed square and pivot to 30 from here, and it's to set the it's a 60-degree angle that's on this piece, but it's 30 that came off, which is what I set the miter to. So that's how the speed square and the miter are to be used together. Measure with the speed square, set the miter to match the measurement. So I'm 1/4 inch back from the jamb all the way along. It brings me up right to there, and then if I scribe the line, does it work out flush, which is the point of a miter that splits the actual angle, is the width of both pieces is exactly the same. So that comes out right there. That's the line I've got to cut on this side. Now this piece is 1 inch or more longer than the piece on this side. And of course these are 3-inch rips off of a 3.5, because I added the half back in the form of this 2x1/2 that I ripped down to 1.5 width. Rip that on the table saw, and then set that together to create this feature. And then it needed a little bit of a bead here. This has like nothing, and then it has a bit of a face on this side. It's hard to see. There's a bit of a face there. So I found something that's very similar to that. It goes basically to nothing here, and it has a bit of a face right here. And so we're going to be very similar to that. And so if I take that extra quarter, I started with, I didn't know I was going to put this up all together in one composition. It's just a best practice because I'm going to, you cut everything together, it's cut. Anyway, when I get that opened up at the baseboard a little bit more, then I'll be 1/4 of an inch off the face of the jamb all the way up, showing 1/4 inch approximately of that white. And it'll get me right here to flush. And I'll scribe that and see that it works out perfectly with this. And then we're going to cut with a hand miter saw that's brand spanking new. And we're going to cut it in place because I had to tweak this down and nail it up a bunch and trying to, get to that point so I can scribe this and then take it back down and then pull it back up. It'd be all full of holes. And so forget that. We're just going to carefully slice this in place until it falls off peacefully. And then we're going to put these up. And then I'm going to use some finish screws and draw the corner together from the edge right through the miter. So we'll look at that in a minute when I'm... Well, we've used the ultimate wood glue. And it's had a couple of hours to dry. There's still, I can leave a fingerprint and fingernail. Oops. In there. So, it better wait overnight. I don't really want to rush anything here. You probably give it a couple more hours or something and it'll be fine. But I'll give it overnight. The one unfortunate thing is that right here we had almost a 1/16 of an inch between here and here in these two middle pieces. So we've got like a 20-inch span where we've got to get a 20-inch span here to there where we've got to get that 1/16 of an inch off the face of this. So it'll probably just be a hand plane and then a sand. The rest of this can be sanded out pretty smoothly, but this is going to take a little bit of doing to get that to come down without frigging up the sides of it. So this will still be the A side. Turning it over, you'd have to take the face of twice as many pieces down to meet the back side of this, so it wouldn't be any benefit. So we'll take the face of it down here, we'll smooth this out, and then we're gonna have to work out what angle this needs to be cut at and get that done somehow. Or maybe I will just cut both side pieces and take them in and install and scribe onto this what needs to be cut and then cut it like that. One way or the other, they'll get this thing. And then I had to pull the screw too far and make a mark on the face. So, got to get that out of there too. Real cool. Just in case it's unclear what the photograph is showing here, but the lengths that I'll go to, unfortunately, the longest bead trim of the 3 available pieces from the local millwork business is hardwood, and I don't even know if it would change anything if it were like yellow pine or something, or even poplar, just like maple. It doesn't want to do the curve that I need to do with it over that door, and so I need a plastic version. But of course you can't just have this in plastic that easily. You're going to have to really put in the work to get to that point. So I did go to Lowe's and get some PVC, like chair rail I would call it, which is like something else. I don't even know where you would use that. But here we are. I'm going to rip the left and the right hand side off, and the middle sits a bit taller, but I don't care. I don't care anymore. It's a tall central component rather than I'm trying to be on the left or the right from something else, and it's going to throw that out of whack. It ostensibly would have some kind of a proud body line there. Everything's going to turn white, and we're going to be done as soon as possible. I also took the cap and put that up. That I didn't get in PVC. It's in that styrofoam. It's like a semi-rigid, self-skinning, I want to say EPS, extruded polystyrene. But it is more clacky somehow. Anyway, that'll snap right off. And it breaks off the way styrofoam breaks with the little cells structure. And so I tacked it up, and I wanted to pull it back down quick, thinking it would behave like wood does, where I could pull it and take the brad with it and then pull the brad through with the diagonal plier. But instead, those pieces just snapped that piece broke at both ends where the little fastener I had shot into it was. So I've 5-minute epoxied the ends back onto that. I meant to get another brand new piece when I went to buy this, just so that I had one on lock in the event that the glued one didn't work out and just broke again or something, which I neglected to buy because it took me so long to make my piece with this being taller, and then I had it in my head that I would somehow take that height down and then sand it up, but you're just going to open up the cell structure, and you are painting it, and it is indoors, so it is a best case scenario, but frankly, I'm just going to leave it alone. But that's the level of, consideration that goes into just finishing this, and it's been kicking and screaming the entire way, and this is just more evidence of that, but we're going to get her, so we're going to table saw the edges off, and then we're going to head back over there and try to get that piece in. Well, my 5-minute epoxy back together repairs on both ends of that plastic styrofoam stick worked out no problem. I was holding that floppy stick by each one of them to be sure of that being strong enough. It's also not going to need to be strung in that way, so it'll be fine here. And obviously it took some wrestling around and fiddle farting. You can see the gap at the wall kind of betrays the issue, but it's relatively consistent. The degree to which, I don't know if you can get up there to see. And that's the thing about this particular location, all the way behind this trim and up onto the top edge of that there, everything is kind of downplayed in here until you get around to this area and you can kind of see that, which will be, easy enough to disguise by caulking it shut and choosing to trim the paint to the face of this wall and then cut into the face of the trim just a little bit more, farting around. But it does replicate that cap that we've got on the side in solid wood. And so I've ripped the edges, as I was discussing, off of that PVC trim, which exposes this porousness, which would have also been exposed in this lump on the front. So I'm going to make my piece without needing to open that up. I'll leave it skinned in. If I put 30 degrees on it, it fits in right here like this. I think that will be okay, especially when I put a little radius in the other, underneath there and kind of close that gappage out. So I set it in this inside curve all the way over there and made a mark on it where it ultimately needs to be clipped at this angle. So I've just put a sketch line on there so I know exactly the direction and the face it should be cut so I don't make any errors here. And we'll come back and pop him in there, tack him in place with staples. Then we'll fill holes. We'll caulk first and then we'll fill holes. And then we'll come back later and after it's dried and do some priming. Well, if I had known how much of a pain in the ass it was going to be to get that wood bead to do this bend, I would have just made everything out of plastic. I knew that this would need to be plastic because I knew that this wouldn't do that bend. It was easy enough to feel that in the store. It's about the same thickness as these strips, but these strips in this aspect are half as wide. For all the wider you get, it'll bend under the same forces by, if you double the width, it'll do about half as much of a bend roughly in terms of structural integrity. So as we got wider, it won't do this bend. And I knew all of that. So in the end, it was fewer strips necessary outside to trim because I did use plastic. It was 3 strips, 1, 2, 3. And it just went just fine. Inside, I'm glad I didn't get stuck on the idea that it needed to stay natural finish because obviously the rest of the room has been painted. Even though the door is natural finish, the extension jamb ended up being primed, and that was the end of that. So in any case, it's all going to be painted. It'll match the room. This is already a bare, even though I can paint it out and lose the fact that it's mixed media. So holy smokes, would it have been more expensive to do in real wood? That would have been completely constructed, manufactured on the bench, along with this piece and this piece. This would have been sliced up. This would have probably been steamed or at least hot water soaked in the sun right along all day before I try to get it to do a bend like that. And like I say, build it on the bench with the ends cut on it and just bring it over here and install it first. But this is the way that we went about it because it was only needed to be painted. And we came right down to what they had for pieces. This awful knot I had to just take. It doesn't have any actual perceivable dimension. But, you know, you would normally toss him aside, but this is all the more pieces of this stuff that they had at the trim shop. And this is a really big joint that kind of sucks. So it's just a matter of fighting with that to keep it flush and get the corner to turn and the flushness out here that you want. And then you end up with gappage, especially because I cut it in place. So caveats and excuses aside, it's going to look great when I fill stuff and paint it out. So let's get it caulked shut. We're done for now. This turned out okay. Doesn't quite match up perfect. It's got a little bit of schmutz here and there. Well, 5 years ago, we rolled up to this backyard and there was no deck and there was no pergola, but there was a lot of potential. It's gorgeous. Just couldn't really connect to the inside of the house. So not only did we build this in around this existing tree, we've since had to trim this cast iron finishing plate back a little bit because it's even gotten larger. When I went in initially, it was complete. And we put some short handrails up just to help. There's a big, you know, like cascading wedding cake stair, but there are some realities with that, you know, and providing a little something to grab onto that's well thought out and part of the design visually, I don't think undermines it. I don't think it may as well have had a section like this here and here. I think the visuals preserved, but the utility has been added. We got this up because I did want this at these elevations above the existing grade. It's too far to not have a handrail, so we put this section in here and continued the old, if you know where that's from, Deadwood. That's from old Swengen's overlooking balcony. I thought that was so cool. I could see when I watched the show that they just laid out and skipped every fourth vert. And it makes this grouping of three. I balanced them on each railing section, centered. Over here they're centered and centered again. So it's not necessarily a pattern that carries mathematically throughout, although it might. I don't think I even checked, but each section has got a symmetrical layout. And I just think that it maybe gets a little heavy. There's the framing layer, which may or may not have been necessary, and that might have cleaned this up a little bit more. I'm so used to making a frame, 4 sides of 2x4, and then filling it in with a layout. But to be honest with you, since there's an order of operations, you have to take the cap off, take the horizontal top of the railing frame off, zip the screws out of the ends of those pieces, take them out on the other side enough to zip these screws out, and then put that back down. Everything's screwed, so if you wanted to do that, that might be a little bit cleaner. I don't know why. I didn't realize at the time what I was doing. I just had that thought. But, and that one sticks in here and off. Oh, it's because that's Waney on top. So it would remove that unfortunate visual where there's a bit of a curve on the horizontal section. So the top ledge of the vertical makes it look like a really bad kind of construction failure there when it's really just the geometry and an optical illusion. But that's me being pedantic. The pergola looks great. The posts have been cut down to height. We've got these twisty boys were fighting me, so it took a while, but we clamped them for about 6-8 months and left it to kind of change shape so that we can pull it together with the correct hardware. There's a bunch of stuff here that I just avoided. This was years ago. I might have done something more, so now I was a little sheepish about how much this was going to cost. And in fact, it ended up being less than half of what it would cost at my current rate, given the time invested. So that's why it's taken a bit of a long route to success or finality, although she's been able to enjoy it for years, even though the details weren't done right. But letting the furnace come through here and notching around that downspout and leaving this right on here and that drywall outlet there, or that dryer outlet, notching around the electrical panel for this air conditioner. These are things I wouldn't do anymore. It was just in an effort not to increase job site scope. I'm sure that this is rotten underneath this windowsill, just as the main beam was here, or the timber that was underneath that window that was here was poor, you know, really bad. That's, and I've told the homeowner this, but you know, nowadays when I look at doing something like this, I would talk about, you know, you're going to want to do something here. While I'm here, you've got to get this stopped. I can't be here for the length of a project like this and not address a window situation like that, especially if I'm adding a door. I'm in the walls already. It's such an overlap in time and energy. There was a little overspray with the stain. However, I had someone else doing it and asked them to rinse and scrub the siding with brake cleaner, and that was all the better. It was able to get that removed. I may make another pass at this because that's kind of an unfortunate side effect, and the inspector may not like this opening. This all has to be under 4 inches in a 4-inch sphere for safety. Shouldn't be able to pass through that, and so technically over here that doesn't really pass building code. It isn't within the construction. It's, you know, between the construction and an existing component. However, I'm just trying to downplay that reality for now because I don't want to have to stick something ugly on there just to close the gap, but we'll see. So anyway, it works really well, and I'm glad, because as I was putting it in here, I thought, man, have I made my life a living hell. It'll be so worth it in the end for the visual, but the process of every step of the way, once I realized how badly it was rotten, just undermined the costs on this, the cost estimate. And like I say, it would have been a lot more at my current rate, but it ended up being more at the time than I had estimated, the whole overall project, due to this door and making it work out in this wall. And so we just took our time and we got it right. So it smells a little bit like spar varnish in here, but I love the way that smells. Works well, latches and looks nice. And overall, it's time for the next owners to make an investment of time and energy, put some stain back out onto this. I believe the real estate agent power washed it for her, and really you'd be best served putting stain on it this year. And of course we recommend TWP, Total Wood Protection. Well, I think that's a wrap for us here on site on the tree deck. This is a project that went on over the most important segment of my small business operations so far. From the pandemic to present, it's been a hell of a ride. My client here, she's had a hell of a ride. I think a lot of us are reeling and trying to understand everything and make good choices. Ever more difficult to make good choices now with what you're trying to deal with for raw information. So this place, hopefully the next owners have more time and energy and can take it to the next level. It certainly needs a bit more of an investment. But for now, it's time to bug out. Thanks everybody for hanging tight. I don't know, this is more meaningful to me than almost anybody else most likely, but it's just nice to close this out. I have to pass that that building inspection first, so let's not jinx ourselves, but I guess that's it, folks. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you.